invest in people in the long term, there has to be a mutual understanding.
Hustle hard, hustle hard. Closed mouths don't get fed. Thinking strategically, but acting like a gorilla is the kind of marketing that's small. When it innovates very little, it's highly risk averse. It indicates
to almost like draw the picture of the customer and to describe the customer's daily activities and their interests and their hobbies and how much money they make and how tall they are and where they go shopping and where they don't go shopping and what podcasts they listen to. Because the more we understand those customers, the more we'll understand their unique needs and how we can serve them. So I want to commend you because this opportunity I feel like is a real one. And often we're going to talk tonight about independent contracting, and being an independent contractor, like working for Uber, is wonderful. But at the same time, if as an independent contractor, it starts to open up your entrepreneurial alertness, like we talked about last class, and you get to say something like, "Wait a minute, working for Uber is great, but I already have 15 regular clients that request me that have my phone number. And why am I working through Uber? Why don't I just be a personal driver to them? Why don't I just go to their only drive them around? And then, oh, by the way, they also need me to go shopping for them, and they also need me to do these other things. And so, why can't I build a business around my client base so that independent contractor for say Uber or whatever other company that you're doing business with that's sending you business as a professional, that is a grounds to begin working. Not only you are actually being entrepreneurial, working as an independent contractor. That's one thing, but in addition to that, this is a beginning phase of what could be your new business. An admirable service, difficult to scale. A lot of times, I have a lot to say about it because it sounds like this is being driven through you. So, how do you duplicate yourself? How would you be able to grow this business to be something that can support you and two or three other people? Making enough money a year to provide for your household. That's going to be an interesting operational strategy that we can work on, but doable because it's a service. And the biggest thing about being a small business is a lot of times our labor is our biggest resource in the business. Our time and our energy is what the business needs. And if we remove ourselves from that business, the business will fall apart. And that's what we don't want to have happen. We want to have a plan to not replace ourselves, but you get the idea, to be able to transition what's happening inside of our head to other people if we want to scale the business. Doesn't necessarily mean we have to. So this is just a bit of a case, and it's talking about the gig economy, being an independent contractor, and maybe some of us have participated in this gig economy. And these are just some stories of people. So I'm going to read this. Is there such a thing as a traditional college student anymore? The full-time student who does not take a job until graduation, perhaps with the exception of summer internships. Students are leaping into previously unthinkable income-generating activities, thanks to the new opportunities in the gig and sharing economy. Some are even passing on the internships, choosing to work independently as opposed to taking a job with a low or no salary. Here are a few examples of student entrepreneurs. Allison, someone who went to Tsinghua Valley State University, worked as a courier for Ship, as an app-based company that arranges deliveries of merchandise to the front doors of consumers. Rig Turek wanted to earn extra cash, but also to gain work experience. Esmeralda studied the Uber and Lyft model. This is the one that made me think of Gabriella. Uber and Lyft models, and decided she could operate on her own. She started a business giving rides to UC Merced students and delivering food to them. So not only is she giving them rides, but she's also delivering food to them. So she took both Uber and Lyft, and I think Shipped would be another courier for Shipped would be another food service there. Customers text her with their requests. She discovered that a digital wallet company, Venmo, could process payments for her. So I'm interested to see how Gabriella gets paid. Venmo and some of these other digital wallets are great options. So this person learned sewing skills from her mother. While quarantined in 2020, Oaks had time to experiment with some creative clothing designs, which she began selling on Etsy. The quick success she enjoyed led her to form her own t-shirt company. Pretty cool. Hyun, H-U-Y, Nigun. Crazy names. Ohio State University drew from their own freelancing experience in product marketing and translation services to create a new company while working on her MBA degrees. Uplancer is a platform that connects students to gig work and with small and medium-sized companies. So we're going to talk a little bit about this tonight. And I think it's fascinating to hear the stories of other creative entrepreneurs who really entered into this thing called the gig economy. But first, before we get to that, we're going to talk about franchising. And I'm going to show you just this video to kind of get the franchising theme going. That's a good thing. If you don't know that a franchise is a franchise, that means they do a good job with their local brand. So we're going to talk about the positives and negatives of franchising. I have never owned a franchise. I have some interest in owning a franchise in the future, but one of the things that I'm going to, in a way, really express what my personal bias is towards franchise is there's a lack of creativity at times. Certain franchises will constrain you to what you can do and what you can't do. And if you remember back to the initial conversation we had about the entrepreneurial spirit and the entrepreneurial mindset, it removes some of that because you can't leverage resources the way you want to. You can't use guerrilla marketing tactics in some situations. So just remember that as we explore franchise, sometimes it looks very opportunistic to explore franchise, but just know that it all is contingent upon the franchise agreement. And the franchise agreement really locks certain entrepreneurs and certain business owners into certain ways of acting and thinking. And so this is why at times I look at the opportunity of franchise as a good opportunity, yet something to be cautious of. So the Entrepreneur Magazine has a list of the 500 best franchises. And so if you want more information on franchises, I'm sharing my screen right now. You can see this, and it looks like it's a place where not only are they advertising for franchises, but they give you some information on them as well. So this is a great resource to go to. And as you can see, there's likely an exchange here where if you want to buy a franchise, if you want to get on a call with somebody about exploring an opportunity to own a franchise, or just if you want to do some research on your own, why not? So Taco Bell is the number one most popular franchises in the US. It's ranked number one by Entrepreneur Magazine. I'm sure we can ask the question why, like what do they do? And we'll get into that as we go. But this is just a cool list. Jersey Mike's is number two. Dunkin' Donuts is they just call it Dunkin'. I like that they're not using the donuts. It sounds like they rebranded that because Dunkin' sells more than just donuts. And I think they probably sell more coffee than they do donuts nowadays. And then I have Popeyes number four, Ace Hardware number five, UPS store number six. You can see too how much roughly this is an estimate. It obviously depends on the market. It depends on the different options you want, but you can see how much it costs to start this franchise. A UPS store costs $57,000, and as we'll get to, a lot of this franchise initial expenses can be financed by a bank, by the SBA, or the franchisor, the person like UPS and the main hub of Ace Hardware and the main hub of Popeyes. They actually help people with the financing. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to go there with $57,000 cash or you need to find a way to get that money. You can just go there and present yourself as a viable candidate to be a franchisee, and they will consider you. You're probably going to have good credit history. It'd be really good if you've owned or operated a business in the past, or if you have a college degree. These are all things they'll take into consideration when approving you for financing. But I want to lay this out there. Franchising is always an opportunity to enter into the game of business ownership. One of my favorites, the one that I mentioned, I think in the previous class that I just can't even believe they charge me so much money for a smoothie and there's no cost to it, is Smoothie King. And that's number 19. And to start a Smoothie King is a $346,000 endeavor. And so how do these franchisees, which would essentially be the entrepreneur, how do the franchisees make money, and what are they obligated towards with the franchisor? So I'm going to just break down some of the terminology so we can be clear. Franchise, just franchise in general, to franchise something, is a method of distributing products and services in a particular geographic area. It's just a method. When you say franchise, it's just one particular way to distribute products and services. Franchising is a process for expanding a business and distributing goods and services through a licensing agreement. This is important that we understand that a person that owns a franchise is a franchisee, and they are likely reporting to a franchisor, somebody who is the main hub, the owner of the entire brand of McDonald's would be the franchisor. And then they have a franchisee that is the one operating the local business. So the franchisor is the party in a franchise contract that specifies the methods to be followed and the terms to be met by the other party. I don't know if you all are familiar with this company called Soccer 5. It's a soccer company here locally. I'm fairly decent friends with the owners of the company. It's a father-son, and they just started franchising their business model. They were business owners here locally, and they took the Soccer 5 concept and they're opening up in different cities around the United States. So they're the franchisor. The new city in, say, Georgia, let's say Atlanta, that just opened up a Soccer 5 is the franchisee. They're the party in the franchise contract that is granted a license to do business under a particular trademark and trade name by the franchisor. So you're really successful in business. Let's say I'll just use the Gabriella example where she's doing some personal services for a bunch of people, and then she turns her business into this amazing phenomenon of personal service in Florida. And so she's so good at the model, and she has proprietary information, a proprietary training process, and she wants to grow globally, not globally, but let's say nationally. So her option to grow nationally is to become a franchisor. She could franchise her methodology, her brand, and maybe take some of her people to go train and open up other personal service businesses in other markets with whatever brand name she has. And the person who opens up the personal service business in another market will pay her a fee. It's called a licensing fee. And so she doesn't make money from their business, meaning if they make money, she's not taking money from them, but she's charging them a flat fee every month to use her process, to use her methodology, and to use her brand. So she's becoming a franchisor. And so we'll break down a bunch of different examples as we continue going through here. So it's important to understand the distinction between two different kinds of franchises. There's a franchise that has a product and trade name franchise. So it's a process whereby the franchise is granted the right to use a widely recognized product or trademark, like a Ford dealership. I'll say a Ford dealership, or like a GM dealership, or a Mercedes dealership, or Coca-Cola bottlers. So they're just granted the right to call it a Ford dealership. they're not given any other necessary support. They're just given the right to open a Ford dealership. So that's a product of trademark franchise, name franchise. But more commonly, the business format franchise, which is something that you might consider, some of the stuff that we just looked at, is a process whereby a franchisee is provided with an entire marketing, management, and supply system geared to the entrepreneur. Examples include McDonald's, Subway, and UPS store. I just worked with didn't work with, but I met with and talked to at length a new franchisee, a person who bought into a franchise, actually took a loan out for like $600,000. It's a mechanic franchise. So the mechanic franchise has really good value systems so that they trust their customers come in and they know they're getting trustworthy mechanical advice. And he was telling me about the franchisor, like the major element of the franchisor and why he wanted to become a franchise and why he bought into the franchise because of the way they operate and because of the manuals that they're able to provide and the marketing support they were able to provide. So when and if anyone was ever to explore the option of going into and purchasing a franchise and becoming a franchisee, there are so many important steps to this. And one of the most important steps is to understand the franchise contract, because the contract is really going to stipulate how you can operate as an entrepreneur. It puts a little bit of a box, or maybe lack thereof box, depends on the contract. So this is the legal agreement between the franchisor and the franchisee. The contract spells out the relationships and obligations of each party to the other. And one of the things that some maybe not so good franchisors do to franchisees, they see a franchisee that's desperate to be a business owner, or maybe they don't have any means of income anywhere else, and they want to purchase a franchise. And so what they do, because they're institutional, they're sophisticated in a way, because they do this all the time. They're experienced in business. They could very well take advantage of the lack of experience and lack of knowledge of the wannabe franchisee and put certain things in the contract that aren't really good. And so, as a potential franchise owner, I'm saying this to everyone in the class, if you want to explore this option, it is so very important that you have people on your team that help you walk through this process, and that people that you trust to walk through this process. You get into a lot of trouble there. Okay, I'm just going to give a couple options of franchise terminology, a couple ways in which this is done. Maybe you've seen this before. So a master licensee, example, a master licensee for Subway who oversees franchise growth in all of South Florida. So this would be a person that kind of goes around and tries to advocate for the franchise and wants it to grow. Likely a person that has owned and operated a particular franchise in the past can be a master licensee. So that they're really trying to get people to license their franchise. Multiple unit owners. This is a Dunkin' franchise who owns 5 stores across Miami-Dade County. The neighborhood I live in, there's a gentleman in my neighborhood who owns a couple of UPS stores. There's a gentleman I know that I kind of grew up with down in the Keys. He owns a couple of Jimmy John's. Like if you went to a Jimmy John's here in Homestead area, he's likely the person who owns it. I don't admire his job. I've seen him working behind the counter often, and he's kind of like, whatever. He might make good money, and he probably still paying off some of the debt that he bought into the franchise with. I don't know his particular situation, but all I know is that Jimmy John's is pretty stringent on how they have to operate, and it's probably very by the book. So he really has to churn sandwiches, and they don't make a lot of money on each one of those sandwiches. So there's a lot that goes into that. But I know two of them, and I know they work hard. I know they're making decent money, but I know they work very, very hard to operate both the UPS franchise and the Jimmy John's franchise. Now you have this area developer. Some examples would be a Planet Fitness area developer who opens 10 gyms throughout Central Florida. That's a massive one. Piggyback franchising, a Starbucks kiosk inside of Target store. That's an interesting one. So Starbucks is not a franchise, by the way, but the Starbucks has partnered with Target. And maybe you've seen in the last couple of years that almost every Target you go to, there's a Starbucks. And so that's just like a means of developing Target's a big company, and then Starbucks and Target can work together. So you can see the piggybacking franchise would be an interesting one. Multi-brand franchising. This is a fun one. We used to call it like in Taco Hut or something like that. Yum Brands, which owns Taco Bell, KFC, and Pizza Hut. And so you go to one place. I don't know if they have these stores still, but you go to one place and you can get Taco Bell, you can get Pizza Hut, and you can get KFC all in the same spot. It was like, wow, this is incredible. Does anybody know, do they still have those? And think about the cooking process and the machinery and the equipment back there and the training that's involved. It probably looks a little different making a pizza than it does making a taco.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you can train it, but at the same time, it's the simplicity and the standardization for franchises is sometimes what makes them more operationally efficient. So I'll say that one more time. The simplicity and the standardization of here's how you cook the French fries. It's very clear. It's very easy to understand. And we have to do it this way because if we don't do it this way, it doesn't really work. And so let me look at this videos now that okay, so McDonald's is one of the most innovative companies. People think that they just dish out the greasy food and fatty food, and that's not necessarily the case. They've actually pivoted many times, and they continue to pivot as they can continue to learn and grow. And they employ a ton of people. They purchase a lot of beef, so it's a very entrepreneurial organization in a sense. But the reality is, when you're placed as a franchisee owner in McDonald's. I'm not sure how much it costs, and it's probably it's probably at least $1 million to open up a McDonald's franchise and to own it. You are really boxed in on exactly how you can make hamburgers and exactly how your menu looks and all this kind of stuff because McDonald's is going for consistency. So that's just kind of shows you an example of that. So franchises are important. They provide a lot of jobs. 7.5 million to be exact is the amount of people employed in franchises in 2021. And it seems to be that the franchise ownership has actually decreased over the last couple of years, is what the book was telling me. But there's still significant enough to be noteworthy for an entire topic or entire chapter in this book. So it says the figures underestimate the full impact of franchising on the economy. However, because franchising stimulates activity and generates growth in many non-franchise businesses, such as suppliers and lenders. So here's the main crux of this. What are the advantages of franchising? Well, here's one. Established, reputable franchisors offer business models with proven track records. So your next assignment is to create a business model. As a franchisee, somebody who purchases a franchise from a franchisor, the business model is already created for you. You just need to follow it. So another pro is attractive franchisors offer value because they have names and trademarks that are well known to prospective customers. So I'll go into a Jimmy John's when I travel. I go and work with organizations all over the country. And I go into a town and I'm driving on the highway. And I'll stop into a Jimmy John's because I enjoy the club tuna that I get here in Homestead. Now, because I see the brand, I know the experience, I know what the club tuna tastes like. And so it's consistent. Therefore, I go to the franchise in another town. And that's a major value of being a part of a franchise. You know that you're buying into the brand and that people will they might not like you as a person, but they'll come to your franchise because they know the brand. Franchisors support their franchisees through training, favorable purchasing costs, and promotional campaigns. So the business is set up for you. It's like a turnkey. You just need to operate it. So if that's your thing, then hey, this is a good opportunity. And certainly, without a doubt, somebody who takes the risk in a sense and jumps into a franchise and becomes a franchise owner is an entrepreneur. And obviously, everybody can be an entrepreneur. You're all in this class in some way, form, or fashion, acting entrepreneurial. But being a business owner through a franchise is a valid way to go into business. A number of franchisors provide and facilitate financing. I talked about that for franchisees. Let me make sure we all understand that. To purchase a franchise, it costs $250,000. The franchisor can provide or facilitate the financing for the franchisee. So they can cover that cost for you. Obviously, you're going to have a loan to the franchisor and you have to pay them back over time with some of the profits from the company. So it's not like you just get free money, but they can provide it or help facilitate it. They have a banker that they can refer you to and say, this is somebody who understands our franchise model. And so you can go to them and get money. So ever since I signed up for the Chick-fil-A franchisee perspective, and I actually went to one of the meetings to open up a Chick-fil-A locally because they've been opening up a couple of Chick-fil-A's down here in South Florida. I've received a lot of emails from other prospective franchises that want me to be an owner of a franchise. And it's fascinating because they really recruit people. They want you to become an owner of the franchise. I just know that it costs a lot to get into a franchise. I'm not necessarily wanting to do it now, but I'm being exposed to this marketing material often. And my point in saying that story is that they actually want people to purchase their franchise. It's a part of their business model to grow and to become more efficient. Franchising can be a way of exiting companies to diversify. A couple things to think about, and this is an obvious thing, that if you partner with a franchisor, what you don't want them to do is open up other franchises in your area because you want the customers to come to you. Well, unfortunately, that depending on the contract, sometimes the franchisor can open up other franchises in your area, and that's called encroach, to sell another franchise location within the market area of an existing franchise. This is the con. They can do that. The contract might stipulate that they can open up any store anywhere they want. Another one is churning. Actions by franchisors to void the contracts of franchisees in order to sell the franchise to someone else and collect an additional fee. So here's the thing. You buy into a franchise. You can't get out, is what this is saying. Sometimes the contracts stipulate how and when and to whom you can sell your franchise. And so they may prevent you from profiting on an exit. If you remember the entrepreneur process, the last step is exit the venture. And in a franchise, you may be able to exit, but you won't get as much of a return, or the process to exit is going to be a lot more difficult. These are some of the cons. If you work with the right franchise, that's not always the case, but these are some things to take into consideration as cons of franchise. Financial issues such as being misled about earning opportunities. Obviously, they want you to buy into the franchise and pay their licensing fee. They'll tell you that, oh, you're going to make X amount of dollars a month. Sorry, but you don't actually end up making that money. That they're fictitiously pitching this franchise to you, and it's not what it was told to you it would be. Management issues, restriction of the contractual arrangement with the franchisor. So here are the costs. Here are the things that we have to pay for: the initial franchise fee, investment costs, the rental or building costs, inventory and equipment costs, insurance premiums, legal fees, and other startup expenses. These, it depends on the agreement. I know this is kind of general, but sometimes the agreement will say, we will pay for the equipment in your franchise, meaning the franchisor will pay for it. Other agreements will say, no, we're not obligated to pay anything. You're going to have to buy the equipment, and you're going to have to renovate the store, and you're going to have to do all this other stuff. So again, it all depends. The gentleman that I told you about that purchased this car mechanic franchise, his biggest expense thus far is about $85,000 on equipment. He had purchased the equipment that and the tools that he needed to fix the cars. And this is all brand new tools that he had to buy $80,000 worth of tools and equipment that he put into this operation. So that's a good amount of stuff that he owns now, but he's obviously was obligated to purchase it. They told him what tools to buy, and they gave him the specifications, which is cool. Like they gave him the shopping list. So then he went ahead and bought them. Royalty payments, this is a big deal. Fee charged to the franchisee by the franchisor. One of the franchises that have gotten really bad rep or good rep is to use the name CrossFit. To utilize that name, you have to pay a licensing fee and you have to get a certification. So you have to pay a fee to CrossFit International, and then you have to get certified. So they make money on the fee, the initial fee, they make money on the certification, and then you have to pay them a royalty every single month. So if you want to call your gym a CrossFit gym and you want to market your gym a CrossFit gym, you're going to have to pay the piper essentially. But one of the things that they're really good at is if gyms call themselves CrossFit but don't have the initial fee, don't have the licensing agreement, and don't have the initial training, the certificate, they'll sue them. And rightfully so. And they make a lot of money from the lawsuit saying, you can't use this name. How long have you been using this name? How much money have you generated from my name? Oh, by the way, I'm suing you for $300,000 because you've been using my name for 3 years and you haven't been paying me any of these fees. And they're winning a lot of those cases because they have that brand name and they're protecting the brand name. If you wanted to open up a store and call it Staples, and you think you're going to get away with it, you're not. So the franchisor is very good at regulating how those franchise names and brands are being used. And you want that because if you buy into a franchise, you want other people to not be able to just easily call themselves CrossFit or easily call themselves Staples. You want the franchisor to regulate that kind of stuff. And then a lot of times the franchisee is obligated to pay advertising expenses. So what franchise should you select and why? There's a lot that goes into this. I'm going to kind of breeze over it for now. Investigating potential franchises. So we went to entrepreneur.com. We kind of looked at those franchises. So these are just some questions to ask. Is the franchisor dedicated to a franchisee system as its primary means of product or service distribution? Does the franchisor produce and market quality goods or services? That's a big one, for which there is an established consumer demand. So one of the things that we talked about is there a problem? And is there a customer that actually cares about this problem? Those are the two things we talked about for the first hour and a half of class. We know that purchasing a franchise means that, yeah, there's clearly a problem, and yeah, there's clearly a customer base. So the question is, what is the problem and who's the customer base? And exploring that and maybe doing your own research first is important. Is the trend going down? Is the trend going up? Does the franchisor enjoy a favorable reputation and broad acceptance in the industry? Another thing to consider, I know I'm being pessimistic in a way, but say you open up a Jersey Mike's, and for whatever reason, Jersey Mike's got into a scandal where one of their subs had poisonous meat in it and somebody got sick and died. Oh my gosh, terrible. That's a news story now. And unfortunately, all of Jersey Mike's, every franchise is now affected by that because of somebody who did something really boneheaded over in Arkansas, and why I'm picking on Arkansas, but they did something boneheaded that tainted the brand of your franchise. So think about that. That's another risk that you assume going into a franchise. And let me be very clear. I know I'm jumping around, but purchasing a franchise is actually less risky than starting a business from scratch. You're reducing the risk a little bit. Why? Because it's a proven business model, because there's a proven business customer, because there's a proven process and it's already there and you can buy into it. So there's a high chance that you're going to create revenue and you could potentially be more likely to be successful purchasing a franchise. Yet there's restrictions. So these are all things to consider. Does the franchisor enjoy a favorable reputation? Can the franchisor offer an established, well-designed marketing plan and provide substantial and complete training to franchisees? Does the franchisor have good relationships with his franchisees? Do franchisees have a strong franchise organization that has negotiating leverage with the franchisor? Does the franchisor have a history of attractive earnings by its franchisees? That's a big deal. One of the best ways to explore a new franchise is to go to somebody who currently is a franchisee that owns what are these things called? Smoothie Kings. So I go to a person who owns a Smoothie King and I say, hey, can I meet with you? Can I talk to you? Are you making money? Do you like your franchisor? How's the process? Do you think it'd be a good purchase? And obviously he's going to be mad if I'm encroaching on his area. But I'm saying, oh, I'm thinking about buying a Smoothie King, up in Tallahassee. And he says, yeah, let me answer all these questions for you. And yes, it's all good. That would be the best intel you get, is to talking directly with another franchisee who owns and operates a franchise. Independent third parties such as state or federal government agencies, the International Franchise Association, and business publications can be a valuable source for franchise information for potential franchisees. Okay, let's get out of franchising because I think we get the idea. There's a lot to it. There's a contract. You can explore it online. I would advocate for you too, if this conversation type interests you, that if you think it'd be an opportunity to purchase a franchise, I can certainly coach you through that this semester, and we can talk about it more. If your family has a business that they would like to franchise, meaning you want to become a franchisor, that's another thing that we can talk about. And certainly in this class, we could use that as an opportunity to pursue. You can pursue franchising. That would be fun as well. So these are just options in business. This is what's so fun about being a business owner and working in small business, is that we can go in many different paths. And why not? Why not learn about it? So one of my favorite conversations that we're going to have so far is this conversation about being an independent contractor. Because as you know, the gig economy and your opportunity to take your skills and apply them somehow and contribute to society, almost every single person in this class is already doing it. Sabella is thinking about a business that she's building with her sister. She's going to community events and she's creating a business as a student, as a sister, whatever that looks like. And becoming an independent contractor in a way is, this is an individual organization that agrees to complete an assignment but retains control over the actual work to be done. So let's think about the Gabriella's example again, where she says that people will call her and they need her to take them to the doctor's tomorrow in the morning and translate and give them a ride and this kind of stuff. And she says, wait a minute, let me check my calendar. Let me make sure I'm open during that time, because I'm an independent contractor. I don't have to do this for you. I can do it. You know, I can do it, but I don't have to do it. So let me take a look at my calendar. And in the process of looking at her calendar, she now retains control over the actual work to be done. And oh, by the way, I'm going to pick you up in the car I want to pick you up at. I'm going to drive at the speed I want to drive at. Yes, I'm going to complete a task for you, and I'm good at that task, but I'm going to do it the way I do it. So that's different than being an employee. An employee of an organization, as you know, no, when you're between 8 o'clock and 5 o'clock, you're going to do it the way the organization wants you to do it. You're going to have a manager that says, this is exactly the car you're going to drive. This is exactly the way you're going to talk, all this kind of stuff. So anyways, categories of independent contractor. Contractors are freelancers, choose to work independently, providing advisory services, technical expertise, or other types of services or products for companies that do not need permanent employees to perform or deliver, or that they cannot afford to keep on their payroll. So I want to give you an example of this because I'm currently an independent contractor for this company right here. It's called LDR Leadership. And LDR Leadership really has maybe 4 or 5 full-time employees. And so if you go to meet LDR's team, the trainers, you can see this is the CEO, this is the COO, and this is the head of sales. So these are the 3 full-time employees for this company. They're amazing folks. They do incredible things. And everybody that you see down here is an independent contractor. David Ritz, Byron, myself, Tim James, this other guy, Bo, Dan, Gary, they're just independent contractors. So that when they send us on a mission, when they give us the stipulations of the client, what the client's all about, they have a system of doing it. I don't get paid until well after the event. And I think I shared that story with you. The reality is I assume the cost, but I also get paid more than I would working as an employee. So there's a lot of advantages to it. And the category that I've just articulated is really the freelancer category. So here's some logos of companies that also, similar to LDR Leadership, which I just mentioned, that provide the structure for you to be an independent contractor. Has anybody here worked for Uber or DoorDash or any companies on here? Freelancer, absolutely. Consultants or advisors, for sure. A lot of organizations are actually firing their employees and hiring them back as independent contractors because they don't have to pay the employee taxes, they don't have to pay medical expenditures, all this kind of stuff, and they pay them a little bit more money to offset that, if that makes sense. And then of course you're not committed to only your employer. You can actually be an independent contractor for any company. So a lot of companies are actually moving towards that model. Anyways, so I thought I'd show some logos here so you can see some of the organizations who are facilitating this freelance work, is this independent contractor work. I mean, what a fun conversation, because if you're not excited about potentially exploring some avenues of freelancing now, just to experiment as a student, as a professional, to make some additional money on the side and to see if you can use your skills. I mean, if this doesn't get you excited, then if you want a pathway towards business ownership, this is a great grounds to learn. Because like for Uber, take this for example, figuring out how do I become an Uber driver? Oh, well, that's a problem. Let me try to figure it out. You figure it out. Okay, now how do I get my car ready for guests, customer service? Now you figure that out. And then once you have guests, like how do I get paid? How do I have the payment system so that Uber pays me? And oh, by the way, is this a good use of my time? How much am I making an hour? Let me calculate how many rides I can do a week, and let me see if I can make enough money in a week to afford to pay for my school. All of those problems that I just listed are problems that business owners have to answer every single day. They have to figure out, is this going to provide for me and my family? Do I have the resources to do this? Can I figure out how to make this work? These are business questions. And this is what independent contractors have to get used to thinking. They can't just blindly step into an Uber contract and start picking people up randomly. Like there's rules to this. Okay, so advantages of independent contracting: avoid having to adhere to direct orders from supervisors. Amen. I think it was Tatiana who said, I don't like working for other people and I don't like paying taxes. Unfortunately, you still have to pay taxes as and they have direct access to your paycheck in a way. As an independent contractor, by the way, you don't pay taxes. They pay you the full amount, but you have to report your taxes at the end of the year through your LLC, through whatever organization you're using as an independent contractor. And it's easy to set up those organizations. Mine's called Arch Consulting LLC. So I bill LVR leadership. I send them an invoice and they pay me. Unfortunately, they don't pay me until 30 days after I send them an invoice. So that's different than working as an employee, because as an employee, they're paying you continuously. And then also, by the way, I can take expenses like this computer and this microphone and this cell phone, anything I use to facilitate my work, I can write those off as an expense. And then therefore I pay less income tax, because my company isn't as profitable. So I'm expensing some of these items in my everyday life. And that goes for people who are Uber drivers as well. If you're driving your Uber often, your car, by the way, is a major expense. And all of that can be written off for tax purposes. So deducting work-related expenses, which I just mentioned, in order to reduce tax obligations is an advantage. Earning more on an hourly basis because the payer does not incur the benefit costs that they would for an employee. So whenever I would hire staff members in our organization, I would realize that my salary I'm going to pay them, let's say I'm paying them $100,000 a year. That's a lot of money. I'm really paying them $140,000 a year because I have to pay all sorts of other things. Their benefits, which include 401k and medical and dental and vision. All of that stuff costs money. And then I have to pay employee taxes. And so it's a lot. And of course, I give them a cell phone, I give them a car with a gas card, and all of this stuff. It's not just, you're not just paying them a salary, you're paying employees a lot more than that. So if you're an employer and your people are independent contractors, you're obviously paying them less, but you're what you're doing, I mean, potentially paying them less, is you're offsetting it a little bit by paying them. I wouldn't say paying them more, but they receive more because it's not getting taxed as much, and it's not, the deductibles of the benefits aren't coming out. So it's a little bit of a wash in the long run. But from the independent contractor's perspective, it certainly provides a lot of agency, a lot of autonomy. Disadvantage of independent contracting: having to plan and process your own tax payments. I mean, come on, you can figure that out. Please, I hope everybody in this class, by the time you make it through this class, you realize that you're going to mess it up, right? That's fine. But learning how to do these things like paying your taxes is a valid skill that you can learn pretty easily. Lacking a steady paycheck, another thing that, if you're going to pursue an entrepreneur life or a life of business ownership, some days you might not get paid. Some Fridays not going to be payday, but there will be certain days where it's payday, and payday comes, and it comes hard and swift, and you're like, wow, look at all this. And then you have to budget your money for the next couple of weeks or couple of months or whatever that looks like. Being ineligible for unemployment benefits. So if a person who's giving you business, if you're an independent contractor and you're working for a business, they just can say, we no longer want to work with you, and that's it. And so then you can't file for unemployment because you were never technically employed. You were 1099, you were an independent contractor. Needing to provide your own tools, I mentioned that. So that's a big deal. We talked about the gig economy already. I'm not going to get too into it. These softwares that I told you, are allowing people, like the Amazon drop shipping, Fiverr is a big one. People can use their skills in these smaller ways. So the gig economy is a free market system in which businesses hire independent contractors to perform individual jobs called gigs. So this gig economy is growing, as I'm sure you can understand. Sharing economy. The sharing economy is a free market system in which assets or services are shared between private individuals, either free or at a fee, typically by means of internet platforms. And again, that goes to that again. Advantages of the new economy: extra income, trust, flexibility, ease of doing business. These are all great things. Going back to the mindset, wow, you should say, wow, 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 this is awesome. The disadvantages: privacy issues, safety issues, revenue flow issues, miscalculation issues. There's always a trade-off, right? There's always the advantages and there's always the disadvantages. And to be able to mitigate some of the risk, to be aware of the disadvantages, and to plan around making sure those don't happen, or making sure those are no longer disadvantages, you'd be advocating for yourself, and you'd be mitigating risk. And all it is really just really truly understanding your value as an independent contractor, and who it is that you're going to do work for, and what kind of value you're adding, and how that's going to work. I mean, that would be a business model. operating in a particular industry, and within that industry, there's certain kinds of trends and things happening. So other competitors, you could possibly partner with people. So the business model, the front end is the value proposition, the customer segment, the channels, like how you're going to sell your business, the revenue drivers, like what is it that you're selling? Are you selling your time? Are you selling a product? And then, so that's the front end of the business model. The back end is the key partners, the key suppliers, the costs, and the key activities. Like what is it that you'd be doing all the time? So this is what a business model is. You'd have to kind of answer all of those questions. Business model canvas has 9 sections, and the business model is definitely a condensed version of a business plan. Business plan usually is 25, 30 pages. A business model is really just kind of showing very specifically answering those 9 sections that I just listed in a very condensed way. So yes, future of the gig economy and sharing economy. This is fascinating because this is growing significantly. These platforms that keep coming out, like Airbnb, even for people who own real estate, they no longer have to hire property managers or leasing companies. The gig economy grew an estimated 33% during the COVID-19 pandemic. That's incredible. For anything as a trend in entrepreneurial activity to grow 33% is unbelievable. Why? Because people were at home. People were exploring ideas. People were forced to be entrepreneurial. People were waiting for an opportunity to start working from home, to start building the business. And they took advantage of the opportunities during COVID to do so. Both federal and state legislation and regulation regarding independent contracting in the future are likely to expand. I'll make one other comment. There's a high likelihood some of them were full-time employees, and since they were working from home and not being supervised as much, they just decided to take advantage of their time working on the clock for another company to do work for themselves as well. So that goes a little bit to the human nature. Like, I want to be a business owner one day, so I'm going to do it. But at the same time, I'm still getting paid for my job. So, wow, this is incredible. Many gig workers, that's, by the way, that's not ethical. So I'm not advocating for that, just to be clear. Many gig workers may not have thought of themselves as entrepreneurs when they first began their freelancing activities, but I guess it's debatable. Um, what do you think? Do you think somebody that's just freelancing, doing some work on the side, do you think that they're entrepreneurs? So there's arguments on both sides because a freelancer really does have customers, and a freelancer isn't really employed by anyone else. So, and a freelancer should have, unless they're working under the radar, they should have an LLC set up. So technically, they are business owners, and of course, they're doing it in a small scale. So maybe they're not as entrepreneurially aggressive as some, but it's certainly, like you said, it's a good first step. So they have to perform work for more than one company to maintain the status of independent contractor. They have to proactively seek opportunities, and they have to look for creative venturing. These are just some other things that they can be doing. So that's it. I want to kind of summarize and say that. So thank you for sharing your opportunities, or thank you for at least engaging in the process of beginning to identify problems and to be able to articulate what problems are and how they can lead to an opportunity, and to also start thinking about the people who suffer from these problems. This is a great first step to start recognizing opportunity. And you all did a wonderful job. I keep saying it. We're going to have a lot of fun this semester. Hopefully every class, including next class, we have an opportunity for everybody to talk, because I think that you all are great at that. And then also we parlayed this thing called business ownership into this opportunity of franchising. Why not buy a franchise? Why not investigate, or at least know a little bit about franchises and some of the opportunities that lie there? And then we went into what it means to be an independent contractor and what it means to be a freelancer, and some of the trends that these freelancers and independent contractors are capitalizing on nowadays. So I hope you're excited about this subject matter. And
It's
I
inspirational.
look forward to when you reflect on some of these leaders that one might consider to be heroes and think about their lives